I'm Cindy Lauper. My psoriasis was all over, even on my scalp, which may mean 4 times the risk for psoriatic arthritis. But Cosentyx works on both.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis 300 milligram dose and adults with active psoriatic arthritis 150 milligram dose. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at Cosentyx.com or 1-844-COSENTYX. Ask your doctor about Cosentyx.
Acura's all-new ADX, a compact SUV that isn't just built for one thing, it's precision-crafted for everything. To escape the grind with available all-wheel drive. To go with your flow with available Google built-in.
Hey Google, turn it up.
Okay, turning up the volume. And crafted to be heard with an available Bang & Olufsen premium sound system. The all-new Acura ADX, crafted to match your energy. Acura, precision-crafted performance.
Take your vibes and go, 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 go.
Google is a trademark of Google LLC.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
The Kentucky Derby's almost here, and you can get in on all the Derby Day action with FanDuel. That's right, you can bet the big race without leaving the Sportsbook app. So what are you waiting for? Download the app and bet America's #1 race with America's #1 Sportsbook app right now. 21 plus and present in select states, plus offer valid on first real money wager of 10 cents or more. Verified FD Racing account required. Bonus issued in non-withdrawable racing site credit that expires 7 days after issuance. Max refund $500. Restrictions apply. See terms at racing.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 190 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. And I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show and can hear him later today. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. NFL. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. A little mega content morning here with a little Chalk Talk and then Tough Cover radio show coming up at 11. A lot of Mark Henry Jr. on the timeline today.
Yeah, see, I'm going to record this show and then I've got to go plant some trees. So limited content morning for me. I might be consuming a lot of content while doing so. But you didn't come here to get a seminar on tree planting. Not that I could give one, because I'm actually replanting trees that washed out in our flood. So maybe you don't want to take that advice from me, but what I can talk about is AFC draft grades. And so if you missed it earlier this week, we did our NFC draft grades, a combination of wanting to get them in before, people were just over the draft and Mark having a really busy week next week. This is basically next week's show. We wanted to get through the AFC grades, and then I think after that, we're going to start our 3-week NFL expansion team series. So that'll be a really fun series. You guys can play along at home with that if it's not something that you've listened to us do before in the offseason. But today, we are talking AFC draft grades. We're going to break it down just like we did with the NFC. We got a guest host here with Mark. The dog's going to give some draft grades as well, but we're going to go best values, worst values, biggest draft regrets, and grades for each of the 16 teams in the AFC. Mark, let's get into it. So for those of you listening on an audio platform, I'll read out the day 1 and 2 picks, maybe shout out some notable day 3s. Those of you watching, I'm going to have it up on the screen here. But let's start off with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills at the end of the first round, they took cornerback Maxwell Hairston. In the second round, TJ Sanders, defensive tackle out of South Carolina. In the third round, one of Mark's guys, Landon Jackson, edge out of Arkansas. And then on early day 3, another one of Mark's guys, defensive tackle Deion Walker from Kentucky. They had 3 top 100 picks, got 4 top 100 players for each of us. My best value for the Bills was taking Landon Jackson, who I said was one of Mark's guys, but I put him as the best value. He was number 44 on my board. They got him all the way down at number 72. I did not give him a worse value. They didn't really have any of their picks in the top 100 that were reaches relative to my board, and I'm not willing to call a day 3 pick a reach. So I did not give them a worse value. However, I said my biggest regret for them is not landing a wide receiver. They took one in the 7th round, but this is a team that could use some more weapons. And although I liked what they did throughout their first 4 picks of the draft, you would also like to have seen them come away with one of the wide receivers to help Josh Allen out. But overall, I really like this draft. I gave it a B+. Mark, what about you?
I gave it an A. This was probably my favorite draft in the AFC, or one of my favorite. Actually, yeah, probably not my favorite, but one of my favorite drafts in the AFC. It's pretty easy to tell why if you look at my big board. I am like the highest person in the country on Deion Walker. I have him 21st overall. I had him as a first-round grade, and to be honest, him going 109, there was points of this draft process I thought he might not hear his name get called. So I am happy to see that there was enough talent that, it was undeniable once the 4th round hit. But I love Deion Walker. I look at the 2023 tape instead of the 2024 tape when he was playing with a broken back. And a lot of the criticisms for him in that tape was that he was playing too upright and he had a fractured spine. So I think the 2023 tape is a lot more telling on what he can be when he is healthy. Hopefully the back isn't a long-term problem. And then Landon Jackson, I had him 19th overall. So that's another guy who I had a first-round grade on who they got in the 3rd round. Hairston, I had him 24th overall. So on my big board, Maxwell Hairston's actually the 3rd best player that they got according to my board. But I had him as a first-round grade, and they got him later than I had him. I had TJ Sanders a little lower, but I had him like 60. So taking my number 60 guy at 41, I'm not going to say that that's a bad value, especially when you got the D tackle later that I probably would have taken ahead of him. So I really, really like what they did with these first 4 picks. And I understand where you're at with the receivers, but I think at least, and there are people who love Sanders. I know David really likes Sanders, but Hairston, Landon, and Deion, I think those values were too good to pass up. And the fact that they didn't get a wide receiver on the board, I'm with you. Like, coming into the draft, I would have said they should have taken one. But I'm also a little lower on this wide receiver class than a lot of people. So I don't hate them kind of going all in on defense with what they thought were pretty good values and what I think are pretty good values, and kind of passing up on receiver if there maybe wasn't the guy there.
Yeah, I like TJ Sanders more than you did. And you obviously don't know Deion Walker's going to be there in the 4th round. But had you known that, you could have spent that TJ Sanders pick on Trey Harris. He went like 16 picks later. He went right before, but Luther Burden went off the board 2 picks before them, and he could have been a fun guy in that offense. Although, overall, it's a minor quibble. I would have liked to have seen him end up with a wide receiver, but I think it was a really solid draft nevertheless.
Yeah. My quibble was just I like Morrison more than Hairston. Morrison went in the late 2nd. Hairston went 30, but I still had Hairston graded as a first-round pick. So I love the draft. Buffalo, I'm struggling with – I always do right after the draft my early predictions with the over-unders and try to kind of get an idea of who I'm picking to go to the Super Bowl even as early as May. And you look at the Chiefs roster, and it's easy to kind of pick apart this year as opposed to, I think, previous years. So I want to try to get behind the Bills, get behind the Ravens, get behind a team. And we'll talk about that with a couple of the teams that come up in this show. And the Bills are the one where I've talked about it on here before. I just don't believe in Sean McDermott as a coach and his defense in these big spots, whether it be Mahomes or whoever, Burrow in the past. I think that defense and the scheme has a legitimate kind of issue when it comes against elite quarterbacks. But, man, they try to take care of that issue a little bit here for really solid defenders.
Yeah, Johnny and I did a live rewatch of the AFC Championship game, the All 22 on offense and defense, to take a look at the Chiefs and in the lead up to the Super Bowl. And on the Chiefs offense, all we just kept talking about was how awful the Bills defensive game plan was. Literally, it's one of the worst playoff defensive game plans I've ever seen. So that one put me fully there with Sean McDermott. I just don't see how they're going to win with him as the head coach in that conference. But
didn't the Chiefs have one of like the best success rates in like playoff history in that game or something crazy?
Yeah, it might have been. They just ran the most blatantly obvious cover one man nearly every snap the entire game, even though they kept getting killed by it. So it was pretty bad. Let's go to a few comments here. Dives chiming in says, amazing draft for the Bills. The top 4 picks are beyond solid. We've got a resident Ravens fan chiming in, said, salute, passing through and dropping a like on the video. If you stick around, we'll be to the Ravens here in a few minutes, but I'll have the time-stamped podcast up later today. Says, thanks again for a blowout in the Super Bowl. Much respect from Baltimore. Ryan's chiming in, says, hi. Yeah, and then Dibes and the Ravens fan are talking a little bit. Ryan asked if he can bring up an Eagles thing. You can drop it in the chat. Some guys here talking, but we're mainly focusing on the AFC today. So let's keep rolling on. We'll go to the second team in that conference or division rather, and it is the Miami Dolphins. So the Dolphins took Kenneth Grant in the first round at pick 13, Joa Sevenai, guard out of Arizona in the second round, and then they did not pick again until day 3. So they had 2 top 100 picks. They actually ended up with 4 top 100 players for me. My best value pick for them was Quinn Ewers. He was number 93 on my board. They got him down at 231 in the 7th round. So you can go get a quarterback there to back up Tua. My worst value for them was Jonah Sevenai. I had him at 73. They took him at 37. I just felt like they majorly reached with both of their top 2 picks. And so that's my biggest regret for them. I thought Kenneth Grant was a big reach. I had a 2nd round grade on him. I thought Jonah, I had a 3rd round grade on him. They took him at the very top of the 2nd round. So even though they got Quinn Ewers and Ollie Gordon, guys that were barely in my top 100 late on day 3, I gave this grade a D-. I gave this draft a D-. I thought this was really poor drafting by the Dolphins.
Yeah, this is one of my least favorite drafts, not just in the AFC, but the whole NFL. And I think the Dolphins came in with 2, to me, desperate needs. And it was on the offensive line and even more so to me in the secondary, especially Jalen Ramsey. There's some rumors that he's going to be traded. And if that's the case, then you even have an even more desperate need at corner. I'd argue even if you had Ramsey, that you needed help at corner. They have nothing at safety that gets you excited. I think they came into the draft with 3 to 4 offensive line needs. And your first pick's a defensive tackle and your third pick's a defensive tackle. You didn't make a pick in the 3rd or 4th round. Your second, like, if you know that you don't have a 3rd or a 4th round pick and you're picking 13 and you have the 5th pick of the 2nd and you're going to take Kenneth Grant and Jonas Savigny, probably trade down from both of those picks or at least one of those picks. It makes no sense that they didn't recoup any value in round 3 or 4. The fact that they didn't address secondary until round 5 with a guy that, to be completely honest, I did not even evaluate, and Jason Marshall Jr. I think that the secondary is going to be the worst in football. I think we're going to be talking about a team that, for fantasy purposes, now I know this isn't a fantasy show, but if you got a quarterback or a receiver going against the Dolphins next year, I think you're going to be playing them no matter what, because I think this secondary is going to be terrible. And I think the O-line is going to have massive problems, but hey, it's not like you've got a quarterback who has trouble staying healthy behind it. So
yeah, this was the perfect spot for Dylan Gabriel to go get the lefty that can't throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field. And obviously we'll talk about him later, because that would have been a good 7th round pick for the Dolphins, but he went 4 rounds earlier. But yeah, just not the best draft for the Dolphins at all. So let's keep rolling here, and you guys can drop in the chat too. Let us know what your grades for some of these picks are, but let's go to the New York Jets, who in the first round took Armand Mimbu, offensive tackle out of Missouri. In the 2nd round, they took Mason Taylor. 3rd round, I don't know how to say this first name, cornerback out of Florida State. What was it?
Azare.
Yeah. And then took 4 picks on day 3. They had 3 top 100 picks. They took 2 top 100 players for me. I did not give a best value or a worst value for them, which feels like a big cop out. I didn't watch Thomas, so I can't speak too definitively on him. If you told me I had to take a worst value, I would say that because he didn't make my cut of guys to watch. But that doesn't mean he's bad. I don't know. I didn't really want to talk too badly about him. And for Mimbu and Taylor, they took him pretty close to where I had him rated. But my biggest regret for them is just not flipping those picks. I would have rather them taken Tyler Warren in the first round and taken offensive lineman in the second round. I thought that would have been just a better setup for them. So overall, I gave the draft a C. It just, I don't know. It didn't do much for me. I did not have a strong reaction in any direction.
I love this draft. This was one of my favorites. And partially because they got 2 of my favorite late round guys. I'll start there with Malachi Moore, who is a guy that if he can stay healthy, I think he is a stud on the field. I think all the problems with him come with the injury concerns. And then Tyler Barron, who's become one of my guys. I had him ranked like 60 something, I think. At the end of the process, he goes 176. This is a guy that I don't really understand, like why he didn't get more attention and why he didn't rise up any boards. Tyler Barron had a 9.77 relative athletic score. He had 10 sacks at Miami last year, 28 quarterback hurries, second best pressure rate in all of college football, the best pass rush grade in all of college football from true pass rush sets. I don't understand how this guy is the 176th pick of the draft when he's coming out of a big school. He's got the size. He's got the relative athletic score. He's only a 1-year producer, but I really think Tyler Barron can become an NFL, a rotational edge, if not more than that, if he really pops. But I don't know if he'll even get the chance down there in the 5th round, but really, really loved the late values. They got Arian Smith's another guy, didn't make my top 100, but I do see the vision with Arian Smith. Georgia was a little bit of a weird situation this year. Carson Beck was really disappointing, but I do think he shows flashes in moments. I totally agree with you. I would have liked it more if they flipped Warren, if Membu Taylor was Warren and Ursery or Warren and Milam, whatever second round O lineman you want to assign to them there. I'm lower on Mason Taylor. That's why this is an A- and not like an A+. And I also like Azariah Thomas. I think I have him around there in the 80s where he got drafted. But Mason Taylor's the one that I would be wanting back if I were them. But you got to love what the Jets are doing on the offensive line now with Membu on one side, with Fashanu on the other side, Elijah Vera-Tucker on the inside, Tittman on the inside. That's 4 guys that they've drafted in just the last 4 or 5 years, and they've all kind of panned out. So, the Jets are a team that I really do think are going to be more competitive than people think. I think their win total is 5.5 right now. I think this is a team that's going to flirt with 500, win 8-9 games. They have you have Justin Fields and Breece Hall. Now you have 3 really elite offensive linemen up front. Hopefully the other spot holds up besides Tittman. And I think that O-line's one of the best in football. If Membu pans out, you have a mobile quarterback. You've got a great running back. I think they could kind of, if the defense works this year better than it did last year with Aaron Glenn, I think that O-line and running game could kind of carry them to respectability this year.
Yeah, getting that, we'll call that the getting Aaron Rodgers out of the building effect.
That too. That too. I like the Jets offseason.
All right. So we can keep an eye on the Jets. Let's keep going. We'll close out this division with the New England Patriots, who made a ton of selections. In the first round, they take Will Campbell, offensive tackle out of LSU. On day 2, Travion Henderson and Kyle Williams and Jared Wilson. And then they made a ton of day 3 picks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 day 3 picks. So for a team very void of talent, they end up making 11 selections in this draft. My best value for them was edge rusher Braden Swinson. He was number 68 on my board. They took him all the way at 146. Now, there's some reported maybe issues that he had with coaching staff in college and things like that I can't really speak on that might have caused him to fall. So maybe it ends up not being a steal if that doesn't pan out. But, at pick 146, well worth the risk. My worst value for them was wide receiver Kyle Williams, who I did not have in my top 100. They took him at 69. And so I said my my biggest regret for them was their third round picks of Kyle Williams and Jared Wilson. I would have rather seen them take, like, instead of those two guys, you could have taken Wyatt Milam and Jalen Royals, or Wyatt Milam and Elik Iomanor. I would have liked that offensive line wide receiver combination a lot better in the third round. But overall, they had 4 top 100 picks. They had 3 top 100 players for me. Joshua Farmer, I also like. He just didn't get into my top 100. I gave them an A- overall.
I went with a B, and a lot of the reason this isn't an A or an A- is because I think Will Campbell, the more I think about it at 4, I think it's just too much of a reach for me. I just don't think there was an offensive lineman worth drafting in the top 5 this year, and I think the Patriots jammed a square peg in a round hole to make sure it fit a need without trading down. I really don't like taking a tackle at 4 when there's not a tackle worth taking. I think that pick should have been Genty. It should have been Tet. I think if you go Genty and Ursery instead of Campbell and Travion, I think that improves the draft. But where we do differ a little bit here is I actually really like their third round because Kyle Williams is a guy I'm a little higher on. I have him 80, so they drafted him a little higher than I had him. But he's a guy who I've kind of risen on through the process. And then I think Jared Wilson's the only center in the draft that can probably start right away. Gray Zabel might be a center too, so that's it. Guys that are currently guards or tackles that could become centers, notwithstanding. I think Jared Wilson's like the one true center who I think is going to be a starter in the NFL. And I really do. I think he's another guy. If he would have played one more year at Georgia of just another clean year at center, I think he's probably a much higher pick. I think he got hurt by just having 1 year of really being a true starter there. But I don't think there's a lot on the tape to pick apart there with Wilson. I think I had him 51, 52, something around there. And they got him at 95. So I did like that kind of stretch of the draft. Swinson, I wasn't as big on as you guys, but in the middle of the 5th round, I think that's great value to take someone that, the industry kind of likes. And yeah, it comes down to Campbell, Travion instead of Genty Ursery for me, with this being a B instead of up near an A-.
All right. A couple questions here. Ravens asked, he says the Patriots are going to be tough and give Buffalo some competition. Didn't Milton Williams sign with them? He did. Milton Williams is in New England. Dibes wants to know, what are some realistic expectations for Drake May? Can he become a top 10 quarterback in 2025? Depends. If you're talking top 10 statistically, I doubt it. I think they still lack too many pieces, but I think he'll take another big step towards proving he's going to be that long-term franchise guy. Any thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, I totally agree. Shane and I totally agree on May that he's a potential down the road, top 5 guy, or he's, a true franchise guy. I will say, just from like a stat standpoint, because Shane mentioned it, I've started to dive into some of the fantasy rankings out there, and he's being ranked as a fringe starter, like 12, 13, 14 on boards. If you go through, and I get that it's an entirely new system, it's a new scheme on offense, everything like that. You go through the stats, it's hard to make an argument that he should be drafted before like the top 20 fantasy quarterbacks. But that's more of just and I do think Vrabel is going to kind of do what Harbaugh did with Herbert in LA, where you take a lot off his plate. You run the crap out of the ball. You focus on, pounded out football. But then in the clutch moments, and when you do throw the ball 25 to 30 times in those games, Drake May is going to be incredibly efficient with those attempts and not kind of take you out of the game with that. So, yeah, I do like I do love Drake May. I don't know if he's going to become a top 10 guy yet, though.
Yeah. All right, let's keep rolling to the Kansas City Chiefs. They traded from 31 to 32 with the Eagles, took offensive tackle Josh Simmons from Ohio State. In the second round, Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee. And then in the third round, they double dipped. They took Ashton Gillette out of Louisville and Noel Williams out of California. And then they had 3 picks on day 3. They had 4 top 100 picks, had 5 top 100 players off of my board. Their best value I had is Josh Simmons. He was 14 on my board. They got him at 32. Obviously, there's some injury concerns there, but if he's healthy, that's a great pick. My worst value for them, and judging by Mark's fist pump when I said his name, he would disagree, is Noel Williams, who I didn't have ranked. They took him at 85. And so my biggest regret for them was their third round where they went Gillette and Williams. I mean, I would have rather seen them go like Princely at pick 66 and then go Darian Porter or Siobhan Ravel and then take Swinson. Like there's some different ways I would have liked to have seen them play the third round. But overall, I liked their draft. I liked a lot of the players. They got Jalen Royals is a nice pickup for them on day 3. I gave him a B+ overall.
I lost my spot there. Gave him an A-. And the reason I really hammered this home, I'll get into the rest of the draft, but I really do think that the important part here is the first pick. If you're the Chiefs, if you're the Eagles, you're the Bills, you're the Ravens, you don't get a chance to pick in the top 10, the top 15, because you don't bottom out. You compete every year, and you are usually picking between 24 to 32. And you don't get a chance at blue chip type guys when you're picking in that range. The only way you do is either attitude concerns or injury concerns. And I understand that you're taking a risk when you roll the dice on a guy like that. But Josh Simmons, I had him 10th overall. Shane had him 14th. I think pretty much industry-wide, if you took the injury out of the conversation, he was the top 10 to top 15 player. And he was a top 3 offensive lineman, undoubtedly, in this draft. And for them to get him at 32, and I understand they're taking a risk. They're rolling the dice. Maybe he gets hurt. Maybe he stays healthy. But taking a swing at a guy that the caliber of his talent, you're never going to get a chance to take a swing at as a rookie. I think it's genius stuff from Kansas City. And it's why Kansas City's where they are. It's why they're able to retool and reload when they lose guys. Even, I just said it earlier. Take a look at the Chiefs roster, and we're going to do it, throughout the offseason with certain things that we do. It doesn't feel like it's felt the last couple of years, especially going into the year. It feels weaker. But the way you fix that is drafts like this. Omar Norman Law, I thought that was a little bit of a reach, but I had him in the top 100. So picking him 63, not too big of a deal. I never got the Jalot thing. I was never in on Ashton Jalot, so that was my worst value. I love Noel Williams. Noel Williams is probably like the number one guy in this process who I've like fallen in love with, who I didn't really know anything about going into the process. Of course, I changed. This is behind the scenes, inside baseball. Ever since I changed my handle on Twitter, I can't search through my own tweets anymore. So I have a tweet about Noel Williams that I wanted to reference with some stats on it, and I can't. But look him up for yourself. Noel Williams, pretty good corner, ball hawk of a player. I never got the Jalen Royals thing, but again, you get to pick 133, taking a guy that a lot of the people in the industry like. I get it. Jeffrey Bassa, I like that as a day 3 swing. He was like a 7th round mock guy I would take on PFF. And then last but not least, 7th round, Brashard Smith. That guy's playing a role in the next 2 years for Kansas City at wide receiver or at running back because they have nothing in that backfield. Isaiah Pacheco stinks. Kareem Hunt was the much better player last year and got more snaps. I would not be surprised if Brashard Smith ends up being like the running back that plays the most by the end of the year. He's a hell of a pass catcher. Really, really good receiver. So watch out for Brashard Smith. I like that comment from Dibes.
All right. There you go. Yeah, Dibes said he's a fascinating fit in Kansas City, big-time dual threat who fits what they do well.
He made my top 100. I got him in the 7th.
All right. There you go. Let's keep rolling to the Las Vegas Raiders, who in the first round took Ashton Genty. In the second round, Jack Beck. Third round, Darian Porter, Caleb Rogers, and Charles Grant. And then they made 6 day 3 picks. They had 5 top 100 picks. They got 3 top 100 players for me. My best value for them was offensive lineman Charles Grant. He was 66th on my board. They got him at 99 overall. And then my worst value was wide receiver Jack Beck, who I did not have in my top 100. They took him 58 overall. My biggest regret for them was not addressing the defensive line earlier. They don't take a defensive lineman until day 3 after they'd already taken 6 selections. And I think that was a big need for them. And you had guys like Landon Jackson and Princely Uman Mielen who were falling. So I would have liked to have seen them address the defensive line earlier. Ashton Genty is going to be a lot of fun there. You've got 2 blue chippers on that offense with Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers. But overall, I gave their grade a C-. I thought they had a lot of draft capital expended that seemed a bit of reaches for me. So while I liked the Genty pick, which is a whole other conversation we could have about like, well, they took a running back 6 overall and they don't have a quarterback. And,
they have a quarterback.
They don't have a long-term answer at quarterback, but there wasn't that guy to go get. And this wasn't a great like trade down draft. And so I don't mind that. Like there was a lot of unsure things in this draft. Go get the sure thing and lock that in and go from there. And so I don't mind that approach. So it's not about the Genty pick at all. I like Genty there. It's more about what happened after that first round pick pushes that grade down a little bit for me. So C- overall for me.
It's an A for me. It's so funny because me and Shane were talking off air. In the NFC, every grade we had was pretty much within a letter grade or within like a minus to a B. It's B- to a B or a B to a B+. And in this one, we're like 2 letter grades off on like half the board. But for Ashton Genty was my number 1 player on the board. So, and especially, I think I'm giving them a little extra credit because there was all those rumors the day of the draft that he was going 5, that maybe he was going 4. And I think a lot of that was clearly just to get a trade up from Chicago or Dallas or maybe even Vegas. But Vegas was able to stick at 6 and pick the guy that they wanted all along. And I think that there's value to that, to not having to move up to get your guy. Jack Besh is not a pick I love. I would have rather taken Jalen Noel. But it's funny. Jack Besh was actually by the time that pick went off the board, my top 6 receivers were all gone, and Besh was my number 9 receiver, and he was only like 3 spots overall behind my number 7 receiver. So if they were dead set, and they didn't, I actually think receiver was their biggest need coming into the draft. So they did go out and get a tall option. He kind of fits well next to Jacoby Myers. I do like Besh. I just would have maybe preferred Jalen Noel. Maybe they thought he was too similar to Myers. But where I love this draft is Darian Porter there at 68. I had a first round grade on Porter. So I had Porter 23rd overall, 22 overall, something like that. And I really, really think that guy has like superstar potential in a way that a lot of these guys don't have because of his athleticism, his traits, his frame, his ball skills. He hasn't been playing football for very long, which it's funny. Sometimes when I don't like a guy and I hear that, I'm like, why are we talking about inexperience as a positive? But then when I like a guy and I hear that, I'm like, think about the upside. It's such a
he's so raw.
I'm such a hypocrite when it comes to that. It's confirmation bias. But Darian Porter is a guy who I really like. I think that's a great value. Charles Grant, not a guy who I liked, but I'm willing. You know what? They picked the 99th. You loved him so much. Dobbs loved him even more. David loved him. So many people love Charles Grant that I'm willing to say that's a good pick at 99. There wasn't a lot in way of O-line still on the board at that point either. Milam went right before that, and he was kind of like the last big O-lineman that I had ranked pretty high. And then one last name I'll mention, he was in my top 100 also, J.J. Pegues. I had him 100, and he's a fun player. He also has taken a lot of snaps at fullback, and he was good there in college. But I actually think he's a rotational D tackle at the next level.
Yeah, the Darian Porter thing, I like Darian Porter. It just, the whole question with him becomes like, did it all finally click, or was it a 24-year-old beating up on 18-year-olds?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing I always have with like the late, like 5th or 6th year player that finally breaks out, because I love Porter. I just do have questions. But top of the 3rd round, even if it was a 24-year-old beating up on 18-year-olds, it's not like you risked a ton to go get him.
And if you're the Raiders, I do think it's like a nice gamble because I do think if he pays off, like I said, with those traits and athleticism, and he is older, that is something I generally don't like in players. But I think if he pays off, he could really boom from that 3rd round spot. So you're the Raiders. If he doesn't work out, you're not competing for a Super Bowl this year anyway. So I do kind of like the gamble there. And by the way, Raiders to the playoffs.
All right. You heard it here first. Let's keep
prediction.
rolling. Let's go to the Denver Broncos, who in the 1st round took Jahdae Barron. In the 2nd round, R.J. Harvey. 3rd round, Pat Bryant and Savion Jones. And then they made 3 day 3 picks. So this will be an interesting one too. My worst value for them was R.J. Harvey, who I had at 96 overall. They took him at 60. Mark's best value for them was R.J. Harvey. So here we are again. Let's have the R.J. Harvey conversation, and we'll get into the to the rest of it. I think we sort of had this one on the Armchair Scouts a little bit, but to me, he's like the Madden football running back that everybody wants. That's like super fast, super agile, and nothing else matters because you're the person controlling him. And I just don't feel like that guy usually works out at the NFL level. And so I think he'd be a fun dart throw, but I thought they really reached for this guy who, if he hits, would be great. But I just don't see a lot of I see a lot of, I'm a playmaker. I don't see a lot of running back instincts. Like if you can get him in the open field, he is electric. To me, the problem is getting him into the open field. So you were really high on RJ Harvey. You listed it as your best value. So give me the flip side to that, and then we'll talk about the rest of their draft.
So let me be clear about listing him as the best value. I actually have him, I think 64 overall. So I actually have him lower than where he went. But the reason that I listed him as that is because he was my number 5 running back, and the other 4 running backs were gone by the time Denver was Genty, Hampton, Travion and Judkins. Travion and Judkins were all gone by that point. So I think RJ Harvey.
We lost Mark. Mark will maybe hop back in here in a second, having some technical difficulties. So I'll go ahead and keep talking about the rest of this draft. Oh, nope, there's Mark. We'll get him back in.
That was bizarre. But I think RJ Harvey, I'm mad that the Broncos didn't take Omarion Hampton at 20.
Yes.
I think that was the right pick. And that's why I gave Denver a C here. And the problem is, I like Jedi Barron. So I had him as a first round pick. I think I had him 23 or 24, 25, something like that in that range. You take him at 20. He's versatile. I don't really think that this was a need for Denver. I don't think secondary would have been on my top 5 list of things that I would have went and drafted to shore up if I'm Denver. I would have wanted a running back. I would have wanted a receiver. I would have wanted a tight end. I would have wanted a pass rusher maybe. Maybe Jahad Campbell. I don't really understand going with secondary when you have Surtain, you have Riley Moss, you have I did hear back. I talked about this on Twitter a bit. I guess they didn't have a lot of depth in the secondary. They kind of just had their starters. I don't know if the first round pick is where you should be looking for depth in the secondary, but whatever. I get it. He's a good player. They should have taken Hampton at 20, but because they didn't, they desperately needed a running back on day 2. And I think they took the right one there in the round 2, which is why I listed it as the best grade. Harvey, again, a little bit raw, was a quarterback in high school, so kind of new to the running back position, but his missed tackles forced average ranked above the 96th percentile. I think he's just stupid fast, stupid quick, stupid 6.8 yards per carry in 2 of the 3 years that he played. He's under the 2 negatives. He's undersized, and I wish he had more receiving production. He's never had more than 23 catches in a season. A lot of the times you see guys who didn't have a ton of receiving production go to the pros and do much better. But I don't know if I see that with him. I don't think he's going to be more than a 40 catch guy in the NFL. But I do think they're going to use the heck out of him right away because they had absolutely terrible running game last year, despite having a great O-line. So it's almost a situation to me when a receiver goes to the Chiefs and it's if I didn't like him, I'm going to look dumb now. And if I did like him, I'm going to look smart. RJ Harvey, I think, is landing in a perfect situation. A Sean Payton offense with an elite offensive line. You have the quarterback, whether or not we think he's amazing or not. I think RJ Harvey, if he is any good, is going to look really good.
Yeah, you and I both landed at the same place. Both of us said they should have taken Omarion Hampton at 20. Then that would also have prevented the Chargers from getting him, which is in your division. But we both had corners we liked better for them in the second round. For me, it was Trey Amos. For you, it was Darian Porter. And so I think if you would have gone either one of those ways, I would have given this draft. I probably would have given this draft an A, but I gave it a C- overall. Dives chiming in saying, love Barron, but everything else is meh. RJ Harvey is underrated, but went higher than expected for me. And
Sean Payton said that there was about 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the draft, and they were kind of thinking about Hampton and Genty and the big guys and wondering how they could get them. and they started watching RJ Harvey more and more. Maybe this was a couple months ago. I don't know if it was weeks, but they started watching RJ Harvey more and more. And he's like, all right, we don't need those guys. Keep quiet. Make sure we can get him before people realize what he is kind of what Sean Payton said. So they fell in love with him.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see. This is the same guy that has been laundering money through tight end / receiver / quarterbacks in New Orleans for a lot of years. So, but sometimes he sees stuff other coaches don't see in players sometimes. And sometimes that's great. And sometimes it makes the whole league scratch their head for the better part of a decade. But we'll see how it works out in Denver. Let's keep rolling on. And let's talk about the team that did get Omarion Hampton. It is the Los Angeles Chargers. Went Hampton in the first round, Trey Harris in the second round, Jamari Caldwell in the third round, and then they made 6 day 3 selections. My best value for them was Trey Harris. He was also your best value. He was 23 overall for me. They got him at the 23rd pick in the second round. So good value there. We both, honestly, it's funny. Our chart is the same for this one. Best value, Trey Harris. Worst value, we both said Jamari Caldwell in the third. They had 3 top 100 picks. They got 3 top 100 players for each of us. I gave him a C+. You gave him an A-. So we're over a letter grade apart here. I just didn't love what they did after the first 2 rounds. And the first 2 rounds are the most important for sure. And you get a wide receiver that I liked, and they've needed wide receiver help for a long time. And I really think Ladd McConkey is a good receiver for them. We'll see if he can hold up over the long term. So if Trey Harris comes in and hits, Omarion Hampton hits, you've got the makings of a really good offense there. I just didn't like anything they did after those 2 picks. And so it's hard for me to give them a much higher grade than that. Even though I really liked the first 2 picks, everything after that just really fell off for me. So do you just weigh those first 2 picks more, or did you like what they did after them a little more than I did?
I weigh those first 2 picks more, and I'll get into why I love both those picks so much. But I will say, I do really like Kyle Kennard. I think Kyle Kennard's another guy who kind of like Tyler Barron, a little less than Barron. He went earlier, obviously, by like 40 or 50 picks. But another guy who I think in a lot of different drafts that maybe didn't have as many edge rushers. He's a 6'5" guy who had 11.5 sacks last year. He had 6 sacks the year before. This is a guy who had 17.5 sacks the last 2 years, 27 tackles for loss, a good amount of hurries, 6 forced fumbles in that time span. I really like Kyle Kennard. I think that was a really solid pick, and I think that defense has done a really good job churning out kind of young talent and finding ways to fit them in their defensive scheme with Jesse Minter there. But my reaction to the first 2 picks, Shane, these are your 2025 AFC champion Los Angeles Chargers right here. Omarion Hampton and Trey Harris. I'm picking the Chargers to win the division. I'm picking the Chargers to win the conference. I really think Hampton and Trey were the perfect things to add, because last year, what did we want them to do up high? We wanted them to go take Brock Bowers. We wanted them to go take a wide receiver. And you could argue maybe they should have. Neighbors and Bowers turned out really good. But what they did instead, they've been kind of laying the groundwork with the grunt work over the last 2 years. You go and get Joe All. You sign Mekhi Becton. And now you look at this roster, and I'll get to Hampton and Harris more specifically, but you look at this roster, and I think top to bottom, it's undeniably the best in the AFC. I think the Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar throw off those conversations because you say, oh, well, those guys are so elite that the roster is better because of if we're just talking about, like, I think Omarion Hampton right away is a top 10 to 15 running back. I think Ladd McConkey, probably a top 15 to 20 wide receiver, an absolute stud last year. Trey Harris.
I didn't realize you were that high on McConkey. I knew I was. I thought you didn't like him as much.
I wasn't as high on him coming into the draft, and I was wrong. I mean, that guy was unbelievable last season.
I thought even down the stretch you were out on him still a little bit. Maybe I'm thinking of something else.
No, maybe I was. I don't know. I don't think I was, but I was shocked at how productive he was. I did not think he was going to step in and be that productive at all, especially when they did not have like anything else in the offense away from him. But Trey Harris is a perfect fit with Ladd. I mean, I think Ladd, like, I don't view him as like a wide receiver 1. I guess, even though I do think he's like a top 15 to 20 receiver. But Trey Harris, I think, is the perfect size, the perfect dynamic, the perfect kind of big play threat to put next to McConkey, who does kind of the intermediate stuff. You look at the O-line. I think you have 2 top 5 tackles in Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. Joe Alt graded out as the second best offensive lineman in the sport last year. You just signed Mekhi Becton to what I thought was actually like a really good market value contract. The defense was top 5 in the NFL last year with Jesse Minter. The only thing you really lost from that defense was Bosa, who wasn't playing anyway. So I'm buying all the stock. I think Hampton and Trey were the perfect weapons to kind of put into this offense at the perfect time when the rest of the team was ready to go. And now Justin Herbert isn't kind of white knuckling it with Will Disley and Quentin Johnston and J.K. Dobbins isn't fair. He's pretty good. And Gus Edwards. Like, there's just too much of the Chargers offense was revolving around guys who should not be starting in the NFL last year. And now you've got Omarion Hampton, Ladd McConkey, Trey Harris, a great O-line, obviously of Justin Herbert, and a defense that performed way above its head despite being really young last year. So I think sky's the limit.
All right, I got a comment here from Brandon saying he'll believe it when he sees it. The Chargers winning the AFC, which is fair, considering their relative run of their relative lack of success over the last few years. But
Harbaugh's different, though. Harbaugh immediately took him 11 wins to the playoffs. I think it's the next step.
All right. Well, I would love to see the Chargers be good. I would feel vindicated for having been so early on them for a lot of years, but they finally answer my get Brandon Staley out of the building chance and then go do something would be great. But let's keep rolling on. Let's go to the AFC North. We'll start off with the Baltimore Ravens, who in the first round took safety Malachi Starks, second round edge rusher Mike Green, third round Emory Jones Jr., and then they made like 8 day 3 picks. So my best value for them was Mike Green. He was number 9 overall on my board. They got him at 59. We can acknowledge he would not have been on my board entirely. I would not have picked him if he was there in the third round. But if we're looking at player on the field, he's a great value. It was a very Ravensy pick to get an edge rusher that was falling, to get a safety that was falling, because I had Malachi Starks much higher than 27. And that sort of seems to be what the Ravens do. They hit guys on the consensus boards that are falling. I didn't really give them a worse value. There was nobody that they took in their top 100 that I thought was in fact, their first 2 picks were great value. Emory Jones, I think I had it like 98 or 99, or maybe he was just outside my top 100, but it was pretty close. My biggest regret for them, and this is a stretch perhaps, but I was struggling to come up with something. I said maybe it was not taking Jalen Milroe in the third round. Instead of Emory Jones. I don't love where you're at with quarterback right now. And, I don't think Jalen Milroe is ready to go anytime soon. I think he's probably a year away from being a year away as a passer, but he's got a lot of athleticism you can work with. And so I maybe would have taken a shot at Jalen Milroe in the third round, just as a backup for Lamar. I mean, Lamar's a guy that has been injured a little bit before. You could, and I'm really big on having I said something stupid. I said I don't love where they're at quarterback, and for some reason in my head I was talking Seahawks because that's where he is. But what my thought process was on that Lamar has been banged up at times, and with Jalen Milroe, you have a guy we've talked before about the immediate floor that a mobile quarterback has, and so you end up in a situation where Lamar hurt his shoulder and he's going to miss a 2-game stretch against the Steelers and the Bengals in November. That's really important for the division. Could you win one of those games with Jalen Milroe stepping in and doing a real run heavy, QB run style offense? I think you could, and I don't think you would have to tweak your offense a lot to do it. So maybe that's something I would have done if I was them, but that's nitpicking. I really liked what they did. They had 3 top 100 players. They got 3 of my top 100 guys. I gave them a B+ overall.
I'm a lot lower on this draft than I think the consensus, because everybody's kind of talking about these guys being the winner, one of the winners of the draft. And the big thing, I was just not there even as an on-field product with Mike Green the same way a lot of other people were. I had him 46th. And they took him 59th. I thought there was a good amount of edge rushers still on I would have taken Landon. I would have taken Princely, a couple others still on the board that I liked more. And that's not mentioning the fact that this is the team that employs Justin Tucker still. And did not handle that well, and employed Ray Rice and did not handle that well, and have done this countless times, even though their GM repeatedly says how he has a no tolerance policy. Seems like he has a lot of tolerance is what I'd say for that. So my regret for the Ravens is having no morals. And by the way, there's a Ravens fan in the chat who I know is going to not like what I'm saying. Nobody outside of Baltimore is rooting more for the Ravens than me. Like, let's make that clear. And Shane and I are the kings of the Lamar me. So I nothing besides the Eagles, nothing would make me happier across sports than for Lamar Jackson to win a Super Bowl. I would have won thousands of dollars if Lamar won MVP. I love the Ravens. I love Lamar. I don't like the way they conduct themselves as an organization sometimes in situations like this. And also, Malachi Starks pick was great. I love Malachi Starks. I think I had him 17th overall, so good value. Get him at 27. I really, really would have liked to see them get a receiver, and this is a long-running thing for 5 years. And I did say earlier, didn't love this receiver draft, so maybe it's fair to say this wasn't the draft to do that in. I would have loved Trey Harris. I know he went like 30 picks later, but Trey Harris in Baltimore would be a dream for me. I don't think Zay Flowers is nearly as good as his numbers would tell you. I think Lamar is just one of the best quarterbacks on the planet, and I think he's elevating Zay Flowers, who I think if I was ranking receivers, I think Zay Flowers for me would be like 25th to 30th. And I think he's like very clearly the best receiver Lamar's ever played with. And that's where I'm at. Like, I wish we could see Lamar with one like truly legit top 10, top 15 receiver. And maybe this draft wasn't the way to get that done. But that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen him end up with receiver earlier than the 6th round. But as I looked back at how the board fell at certain picks, I was just like, I don't really know where I would have gone for receiver based off of how the board fell at their picks. So I guess it can be a regret without you having I would have done it this way instead. Just a regret. Receiver didn't fall right to them. Our Ravens fan here in the chat did mention defensive tackle Anias Pebbles out of Virginia Tech. Liked that pick a lot in the 6th round too. He wasn't in my top 100, but he was a great value in the 200s. So
I feel like they got a lot of great values for you and Shane, and they just didn't for me. Like they didn't get any guys that I kind of liked in my back end of my top 100 or a lot of day 3 picks, and they just didn't. It's just how the Eagles didn't either. Like it's just how it goes. Like certain years they do, certain years they don't. I almost always give the Ravens like an A. It feels like so. It feels bizarre for me to be giving them a C. Yeah.
All right. Well, if our Ravens fan wasn't a huge fan of what we had to say about the Ravens,
he was nice. He was nice.
He was. You'll probably love what we have to say about the rest of the teams in your division. So let's roll on to the Cleveland Browns, who had one of the weirdest drafts I've ever seen. So they get the big trade down in the 1st round. They end up with Mason Graham, defensive tackle out of Michigan. 2nd round, pick 33, Carson Schlesinger. They also took Quinshon Judkins 3 picks later, Harold Fannin in the 3rd round, Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round, Dylan Sampson and Shadur Sanders on day 3. And so I wrote this backwards because I said my best value for them was Dylan Gabriel, and that's certainly not what I meant. My worst value for them was Dylan Gabriel. He wasn't ranked on my board. I really said the only place he should go is to Miami. Like anywhere else, nobody else should draft him, and Miami should do it in like the 6th or 7th round. They took him in the 3rd round. And not only did they take him in the 3rd round, they took him with Shadur Sanders on the board. And you're like, okay, maybe they just took him off their board entirely. But nope, because in the 5th round, they spent pick 144 on Shadur Sanders. And we had the Shadur Sanders conversation on the last show. You can go check that out. We're not going to necessarily rehash all of that. But he was 26th overall for me. They got him at 144. That's a good value. My biggest regret for them is that you have a void of talent on your roster. You've traded away a lot of draft picks over the last several years for Deshaun Watson that certainly didn't work out. And so you enter this draft with a ton of holes, and you walk out with 2 running backs, 2 quarterbacks, a gadget tight end, and a major reach at linebacker in Carson Schlesinger. Like, I did not like this draft at all. I didn't think any part of it made sense other than the trade down. I gave him a D overall.
Yeah, I gave him a C, and I might be too nice about it. Honestly, it's just a situation where they got a future first. And I think if you're Cleveland and this year's not what you're aiming for anyway, I think it probably makes a lot of sense to take whatever that offer was and get that future first, get an extra second round pick. Now, the issue is who they drafted. You have Mason Graham, who I'm lower on than consensus at 5. I had him at, I think, 15. And I've said it time and time out. He's very safe. He's going to be a starter. He's going to be a run stuffer. I don't see like a Jalen Carter level upside or pass rusher in him. If I'm taking a D tackle in the top 5, that's a guy that I want to kind of take over the game. And I don't see Mason Graham that way with that upside. Schlesinger was a guy who I thought seemed really small on tape and just not like an NFL athlete to me. I know that kind of flies in the face of some testing numbers. I just didn't love the tape for Schlesinger. He didn't make my top 100. Taking him at 33 was crazy for me. Judkins at 36. That's fine. I would have preferred a couple other positions. I would have preferred Travion. I would have preferred, they do a lot with that, especially knowing that they were able to get Dylan Sampson, who I barely like less than Judkins, 2 rounds later. Harold Fannon's at a position they don't need. You just paid David Njoku. Dylan Gabriel's a bad football player. This is just a bizarre draft, and it's a shame because there's a lot of names, and some of them I like. Like, I like Judkins, just too high. Fannin I like, doesn't make sense for the situation. Sampson I really like. Hate for him that he's going to a situation that they drafted a running back 2 rounds earlier. Like Shador, obviously, like just a bizarre.
Yeah, they took six top 100 players for me, and I still gave him a D because it just made no sense.
It's really, I don't ever remember a draft like this, especially one where you also are picking up a first going into the next year. It's one of the hardest drafts I've ever had to grade. I gave it a C because I almost just threw my hands up.
Yeah. Ravens chimes in, says the Browns will always be the laughing stock of the NFL. Brandon says, I feel bad Super Bowl champion Kenny Pickett has to play for this sorry franchise. I don't know. He might not be playing much. They drafted 2 quarterbacks, so we'll see. So let's go on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who they had an interesting draft. First round, they take Derek Harmon. Second round, Caleb Johnson. Third round, Caleb Johnson. They didn't have a second round pick. On day 3, they took Jack Sawyer. They got Will Howard, a few other guys. My best value for them was Jack Sawyer. I had him at 74. They got him at 123. So that's good value. I didn't really give him a worse value. Like Derek Harmon at 21 is exactly where I had Derek Harmon. He was my 21st overall player. I was worried they would take Shador at 21, and I thought that would have been a bad decision for them. However, when Shador's there in the 3rd round and Mason Rudolph is your quarterback, what are you doing? Like, my biggest regret for them is thinking it's okay to have Mason Rudolph as your QB1 in May. And so that's bad. They had 2 top 100 picks. They actually got 4 top 100 players for me. But overall, I gave it a C because I can't be on board with you entering a season with Mason Rudolph as QB1 and Will Howard as QB2. That's just planning to lose.
Yeah, I have a spin zone. My spin zone is that this quarterback draft stinks. And if you're the Steelers...
Don't disagree.
If you're the Steelers, I think there might be an argument to, you know what? Let's just load up and get some young talent. And then let's get back after this next year and try to figure this out next year. I know that they've done that a lot. I will say they also drafted Kenny Pickett, which I thought was smart at the time and obviously was a disaster. So that didn't work out. But I would say, I think if there was ever a year for it to make sense to do the Steelers path where you go out and you get a veteran quarterback and you ignore a young quarterback, I think it's this year. And I love all 3 picks they made. Like Harmon, I love. I think I had him 13th or something like that overall. I love that pick. Caleb Johnson, I'm not as high on Caleb Johnson as a lot of people, but he go 83? There was rumors he was going to go in the 1st round at the beginning of this process. Jack Sawyer is a guy who I'm way higher on than most. I have him 34. So I love Jack Sawyer. And I think he's gotten really underrated. That guy's a hard worker. That guy's going to become a good player at the next level. So I'm kind of happy that they went out and they kind of beefed up their roster, because I don't think any quarterback they drafted was making a difference anyway for them. So I like that they're doing this. Go out and get Kirk Cousins, do the right thing instead of Aaron Rodgers is what I would say. I would rather make the bet on the fact that I think Kirk's problems were just fully physical last year, not being able to drive the ball at the end of the year. He's another year removed from Achilles surgery. Like I think that if I was buying stock on one of the two, I would go with Kirk. But even if it's Rodgers, I think I like that more than going with a rookie.
Yeah, I don't know how. Not that either of these guys was the answer, but how do you have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in your QB room and let them both out of there, and you're sitting here in May with Mason Rudolph as QB1? That's just bizarre to me.
The Fields thing is really where they messed up in general. He should have started the whole year last year. And then he should have been their quarterback this season, regardless of not starting him last year. That was the Russ. I kind of get it. That wasn't going to work, and it didn't work last year. They were worse once they benched Fields. But what a disaster for them I will say they're gonna have Kirk or Rodgers. Like, we know that's just like a stone cold fact.
Yeah, it's even worse if they go get Rodgers. I'd rather you start Mason Rudolph than go get Rodgers.
I hear you, and I'm part of me agrees, because that's why I'm saying go get Kirk.
Yeah,
but I do get it. He did have moments last year where he wasn't terrible. I do get the gamble. I guess I would just go Kirk.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's go to. We talked about your least favorite draft. Let's talk about my least favorite draft. It's the Cincinnati Bengals. In the first round, they took Shamar Stewart at pick 17, Demetrius Knight Jr. in the second round, Dylan Fairchild in the third round, and then they made 3 day 3 selections. My best value was linebacker Barrett Carter. He was 88 on my board. They got him at 119. My worst value was Shamar Stewart, who I had at 53, and they took him at 17. They had 3 top 100 picks. They got 2 of my top 100 players. My biggest regret for them is just reaching for absolutely everyone. Like, Shamar Stewart was a reach. Demetrius Knight was a reach. Dylan Fairchild was a reach. Everything they did in the first 2 days of the draft was a reach. Like, imagine a couple alternative scenarios with me. Let's just talk about their first 4 picks. What if they went Derek Harmon in the first round, Princely Uman-Mielen in the second round? You could get Danny Stutzman in the 4th round, right? You could get Xavier Watts in the 3rd round. Like, you could have gotten a really good D tackle edge rusher combo. You could have gotten a good safety. You could have gotten a playable linebacker. What are we doing? Or they could have taken Jahad Campbell at 17, and I would have liked that better. And you could have got Darius Alexander in the 2nd round and still got your D tackle. And then you could have gone Xavier Watts and Danny Stutzman. I just thought they took the worst possible path at like every decision tree branch in this draft. This one's an F for me. Thought it was a terrible draft for the Bengals.
Yeah, I have a D+. I don't hate it as much as you, just because I really like Fairchild. So I actually thought they got a good value on Fairchild. I will say I had Milam, I think 60 spots higher than Fairchild, or maybe 50. So I will say they should have taken Milam instead. But I like the Fairchild pick. I like Knight. I like Demetrius Knight. I get the upside. He's just so undersized. But I do get it. And then Barrett Carter was, I think, a solid pick. So I struggle because I actually like that 2nd, 3rd, and 4th pick. But what brings it down is Shamar Stewart stinks. That guy's not a good football player. I have him 54th overall. I get when people, Daniel Jeremiah loves to tweet out the Myles Garrett comparison for him. And I just think it's relevant to point out that Shamar Stewart had 4.5 sacks in college, while Myles Garrett never had a season with less than, I think, 9. So I don't see it. I don't get it. If you're the Bengals, I think you want pretty immediate impact guys and not a project like Shamar Stewart, who...
Well, you need immediate impact because you're not going to pay him if they turn out to be good anyways. So.
Exactly. And you're trying to compete right now, and you're like, this guy's not a guy who's just like a plug and play, going to go get you some sacks guy. Like, this is a project. This is a guy who you're hoping kind of works out down the line, I don't think this pick makes any sense for the team that's in the situation they're in.
Yeah, Raven said, I'll say this about the Bengals. If they can upgrade their defense, they're scary. They have a deadly offense already. And I think that's true, and I don't think they did.
No, they definitely didn't. And everybody's going to predict all offseason like, bounce back year for the Bengals, or, they're going to be right back competing and contending to make the Super Bowl. I think it's more likely that they flame out and it's like, let's fire Zach Taylor and let's kind of move on and let's wipe the slate clean. And next year will be a focus on defense. They'll probably hire a defensive coordinator guy to be the head coach. Like, I feel like we're heading. There's a couple teams I see the iceberg like heading to. We're getting closer, and since he's one of those teams, in Miami, who we already talked about, is like the number one team of that. Like, I think McDaniel and Zach Taylor are not long for their jobs.
Joe Burrow had the best season of his career last year, and they missed the playoffs. Yeah. It's going to be hard for him to turn in an equally good performance. I mean, we see it all the time. Like, have a great season. Doesn't mean you're going to be bad, but generally when you have the best season of your career, you don't hit that again the next season. So if Joe Burrow takes a little step back, and I don't see how they upgraded the defense, I just don't see it with this team. So don't like their approach. Haven't for a long time. Definitely didn't like this draft.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So let's keep rolling into our last division here, and I'm going to stay on the hate train, I guess, for the last time with the Houston Texans. Did not have a first-round pick. Second round, they took Jaden Higgins and Ariante Ursary. In the third round, Jalen Noel and Jalen Smith. And then they made 5 day 3 selections. I did not give them a best value pick. There wasn't one that they took in their top 100 that was really much above where I had them. They didn't take anybody outside of the top 100 that was in my top 100. My worst value for them was Jalen Noel. He was not in my top 100. They got him at 79 overall. My regret for them is trading Laramie Tunsil for a pick they used to reach on a wide receiver. I know they have picks next year from the deal, but their offensive line was an unmitigated disaster last season. CJ Stroud, actually, let me ask it to you this way. Mark, what percentage of his dropbacks in the Super Bowl do you think Patrick Mahomes was pressured on?
What, half?
40%.
Yeah.
And so that 40% pressure rate just made Mahomes look awful. Like, it was unbelievable. What percentage of his dropbacks do you think CJ Stroud was pressured on for the entire season?
About 40.
39.5.
39, yeah.
CJ Stroud dealt with every week the entire season what Patrick Mahomes dealt with in the Super Bowl. And you saw how it made Mahomes look. And you traded your best offensive tackle because of a culture reason. Apparently, like, I don't know, what is the culture in their offensive locker room? Don't block anybody, and Laramie Tunsil didn't fit that. He's a good tackle. You trade him for picks, and you get Ursary, which is a guy that I like, but you did not do enough. They walked into this draft and they said, our number one issue is we need wide receivers. And although that is an issue, that is not their number one issue. Their number 1, 2, and 3 issue is their offensive line, and they did not address it well enough. I thought they reached on guys. I gave them a D. I did not like their approach. I fear for CJ Stroud going into next season.
Yeah, it's just weird that they thought receiver was such a need when you have Nico Collins, you went out and you signed Christian Kirk, and now you also you still have Tank Dell. Like, he's hurt, and I get that he's probably going to miss all of next year. He's probably going to play the year after that. Like, I guess this is just totally giving up on Tank Dell. He has had 2 pretty big injuries. I don't know. But they have 4 receivers now, like, kind of built into their plans. And I don't get going with 2 receivers. I thought when they traded Tunsil, like, oh, okay, so that means that they're just going to draft like 3 O-linemen at the top of the board. You only get 1. And I think they got a good one in Ursary, probably the right one. But I don't get taking 2 receivers. The secondary is kind of one of the stronger points for you. I don't get going and taking a corner and a safety, especially Jalen Smith. Corner is probably like the position you feel best about if you're Houston, and you take Jalen Smith. That could have been an O-lineman. Milam went the pick before that, I think. Right, 90 or no, he went later. Milam was still on the board. So that pick should have been Milam. I actually like both receivers they picked, Higgins and Noel, the Iowa State guys. I love Higgins. I have Higgins right around where he got drafted, and then Noel, I think I had him 73, so or maybe 71. So I have him right around where he got drafted too. But I don't get taking two receivers with the needs that they had on the O-line. That O-line is going to be a train wreck.
Yeah, you can get a competent receiver in free agency, not a good one, but a guy that can run a route and catch a ball. You can get competency. You can't get competency on the offensive line in free agency. And so if you felt you needed receiver, I would have rather seen you set a baseline, which they got Christian Kirk, set a baseline in free agency, maybe draft one, but double dipping at wide receiver while your offensive line is in shambles just doesn't sit right with me. We'll see how it plays out for him. But let's roll on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who in the first round made the trade up for Travis Hunter. In the third round, they took Caleb Ransaw and Wyatt Milam, and then they made 6 day 3 selections. My best value for them was Wyatt Milam. He was 67 on my board. They took him at 89. My worst value was the guy they took the pick before, Caleb Ransaw, who was not in my top 100. They took him at 88 overall. They had 3 top 100 picks. They got 2 of my top 100 players. My biggest regret for them is trading up for Travis Hunter. I think it was a massive overpay. I plugged it into the trade value calculators, and if they win the Super Bowl, so if that becomes pick 32 that they traded away next year, they basically overpaid by the value of like the 20th overall pick. The Jags aren't winning the Super Bowl. They might not be winning their division. If they end up with a top 5 pick, like they have in 3 of the last 5 years, like that is a disastrous pick. And you've got a new coach coming in, new GM. How healthy is Trevor Lawrence going to be? There's a lot of questions here. I like Milam. I love Travis Hunter. You trade up, you trade a future first for a non-QB, I'm out. So I gave this a C- overall. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't even feel like going in more on the Travis thing. If you want to know my take, go to my Twitter. The Gambler radio station actually just put out a cut up video of me kind of going through, for all the same reasons Shane just did, why I think it's a disastrous trade, and why I also think the Will Anderson trade that people use as justification is not necessarily fair. So that's a little plug for my Twitter. Otherwise, on this draft class, I'll stay with the rest of it. I really like a lot of the other stuff they did. So that's why it sucks for me. I would love to give this team an F because I think the Travis Hunter trade's a disaster. Mm-hmm. But Wyatt Milam's one of my favorite steals of the draft. And I had him graded as a first-round pick. He goes in the middle of the third round. Bashul Tutin, also one of my favorite steals of the draft. And I think a really good pick for the need that they have at running back. Travis Etienne stinks. And Jack Kaiser, who I think that there's probably some questions if he can stick long-term as like a starting linebacker, but I think he's got all the intangibles and things you want to buy into as a leader on one of my favorite Notre Dame teams of all time. I've got to give him a shout out. So there are reasons to buy in on the later picks, especially Milam and Tutin. But man, I think that trade is such a disaster. And then James Gladstone, their GM, got up on the dais at the press conference. I don't know if you're a West Wing or newsroom or an Aaron Sorkin fan at all there, Shane. But he started talking like he was straight out of an Aaron Sorkin movie or a television show, that Travis Hunter embodies belief. And like, just, I keep your tech bro stuff over there. And I don't need your fake speech that you spent, 3 days before writing up. But I am really put off by James Gladstone, the Jags GM, and how everybody's talking about this Travis Hunter trade.
Yeah. I mean, if you just think about even using the Will Anderson thing that you talked about, so when they traded up, they traded 12 and 33. And so if we just want to look at some of the names that would have been available had they not traded up, keeping in mind they have no offensive line. Yep. Broderick Jones was there in 2023. There's not a lot of other offensive line in that draft in the first round that was very good, but there's some edge rushers, right? You could have gone, I don't love Lucas Van Ness, Will McDonald. You could have made some moves there. And then you get into 2024. They end up having a good season that season, and so their pick doesn't end up being super high. but it was pick 27. And you look down there, and I mean, Tyler Guyton hasn't panned out so far, but he's just a year in. Like, you could have made moves at the offensive line. You could have made moves at defensive end. And so I like Will Anderson, and I think that's the pathway for that type of a trade to work. They traded the future first. They traded a lot to get him. He turned out to be a really good player. They made the playoffs that year, so it didn't become a good pick. And yet we just got done talking about him a minute ago, how they have no offensive line and they haven't made a first-round pick in 2 years. And so even though that's the pathway for it to work out, and it still didn't work out great. So I get the comp there, and I would say the Texans trade up probably worked out. And even at that, like, they're in a difficult spot roster building wise still because of it. So
yeah, that's my point, is just that I don't think people should be pointing to that trade, looking at what the Texans roster looks like outside of Stroud and Anderson, being like, see, that's why it can work. And it's like, no, that roster has a ton of problems still. And partially so because you gave up chances to get better. But that was kind of my point with it.
Yeah. Daniel says, I hated the Jags drafting more linebackers when they didn't need them. And it was a fairly weak linebacker class too, but I didn't mind the Kaiser pick where they got him.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's weird they didn't pay Devin Lloyd though. They should pay Devin Lloyd.
Yeah. Okay. 2 teams left. Somehow we're going longer on the AFC than we are the NFC, although I guess it makes sense since we disagreed about more. Let's go to the Indianapolis Colts. First round, they take Tyler Warren. Second round, JT Tuimoloau. Third round, Justin Wally. And then they made 5 picks on day 3. My best value for them was Tyler Warren, who I had at 5. They got him at 14, and he fit the biggest need. My worst value for them was cornerback Justin Wally, who was not in my top 100. They took him at 80. And not to keep going to the Wyatt Milam well, but I wish they had addressed offensive line earlier than round 4, even though I liked Jalen Travis. And I think the Eagles were about to take Jalen Travis too, by the way. But even though I like Travis, I wish they had gone offensive line earlier, especially when I didn't love their 3rd round pick. So 3 top 100 picks, 3 top 100 players. I gave them a B+. It especially is nice that Tyler Warren fell right into their lap. They were mocked tight end 2 consistently, and tight end 1 fell to him. So I think that was a great job by them of reading that out, staying pat, and taking the guy they probably wanted all along.
This is up there as one of my favorite drafts, and so much of it, just you laid it out there. Tyler Warren at 14 is a steal. It was one of the biggest needs in the NFL was Colts tight end, and you go and you get Tyler Warren. You get the right guy. You don't have to move up, even though he wasn't the first guy taken at the position. I love everything about that Tyler Warren pick, not just for the short term, but for the long term. I love JTT. He's another guy I'm higher on than consensus. I think I have him 35 overall. They got him at 45. And my steal of the draft, one of my steals of the draft across the entire NFL, is DJ Giddens, all the way down at 151. I had him at 65, I believe. He was my number 6 running back. So I love getting that DJ Giddens steal. And one last thing I'll say, shout out Riley Leonard, quarterback on my favorite Notre Dame team of my lifetime. I don't think he's an NFL quarterback. I will say maybe he can be a fun change of pace backup. He's such a good runner. Maybe there's an argument that there's just a floor that'll give you. We'll see. But
maybe they should just put Anthony Richardson, Riley Leonard, and Tyler Warren in the backfield and be like, we're not throwing the football, but you don't know which guy we're going to run it with.
Yeah. Someone said it. Riley Leonard really is just a complete mix of Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones into one human being.
I said on a different show after the draft that Tyler Warren might be the best quarterback on their roster right now.
It is crazy. I will say I'm happy it's cool for Riley Leonard, Notre Dame, South Bend, Indiana, going just a little bit over to Indianapolis, staying home. Good for Riley. Happy for him.
Yeah. Leonard was inside my top 100.
Whoa. Good for you.
Barely. I think he was like 99 or something.
Hell yeah.
So, and there's some quarterback inflation there, but I didn't list him as my best value because the Tyler Warren thing. But, numerically speaking, that probably should have been my best value.
I do wish that Justin Wally pick was Noah Williams. My last thing I'll say.
Yeah. Okay, last team here. Let's go to the Tennessee Titans, who had the number 1 overall pick. We're covering him last, which is kind of funny. They took Cam Ward. Second round, they took the edge rusher Oladejo out of UCLA. Third round, Kevin Winston Jr., and then they took 6 swings on day 3. They had 3 top 100 picks, got 4 top 100 players for me. Our best and worst values were the same. Best value, wide receiver Elik Iomanner. He was 39 for me. They got him at 136. Their worst value was edge rusher Oladejo. He was not inside my top 100. They got him at 52 overall. My biggest regret for them was not taking Trey Harris in the second round. And then it would have been a small trade up to get Princely in the third round. Or I don't even mind Kevin Winston. Just take Trey Harris in the second round, Kevin Winston in the third round, and just take somebody else other than Chamari Deke in the fourth round. So, I gave him a B overall. We disagree on our grade here, and I think it's got more to do with the Cam Ward of it all. Maybe not. You're shaking your head. Cam Ward, I'm not like head over heels for Cam Ward. I think it's the pick you make. You need a quarterback. You see a guy that I see the pathway that Cam Ward is like the 8th to 12th best quarterback in the NFL. I don't know that it's a wide pathway, but I see that outcome. And so when you're as quarterback desolate as they are, I think you take that swing. I just didn't love what they did with their second round pick, and that kind of cascades down a little bit for me. So what are your overall thoughts on their draft?
Yeah, I'll get to the Cam Ward thing, but it feels like their second and third round pick were designed for me to hate it. If these were 2 guys who didn't make my top 100, Oladejo and Kevin Winston, probably the 2 highest ranked guys industry-wide who didn't make my top 100. So Oladejo was a guy who I just didn't see it on film. And Kevin Winston's kind of similar. I don't get some of the Kevin Winston love that's out there. He missed the entire season, and people talk about his 2023 tape like it's so good. I didn't see it. Like, I thought he seemed like a normal starting safety, a mid starting safety who, had some nice traits, some nice plays. I think that everybody's thing that they're hanging their hat on is he only missed 2 tackles in 2023. He only had 87 tackles. So, like, we're talking about a sample size of like 89 tackling attempts. Like, that's such a small sample size to me to be taking away these like massive things from. So I don't see it with Oladejo and Winston. I think that was a waste of day 2. I kind of like the Helm pick. I kind of like the Ellick pick.
I like the Helm pick.
Those are solid picks. I hate the day 2 so much, and DK as well. At the first pick of the fourth round. And then it comes back to the first pick, and I watched the Cleveland Browns get the 36th pick and a first round pick for next year. That could have happened for the Titans as well at number 1. And instead they decided, we're bad. We need a quarterback. We don't have one. We got to take Cam Ward. I think we've seen in years past, I'd have to go back and find the perfect examples. Blake Bortles comes to mind, obviously not the number 1 pick, but we've seen in years past when teams shoehorn in their new need for quarterback at the top of the draft instead of taking elite blue chip talent or accepting a trade down of epic proportions with Cleveland and Jacksonville. So I don't think he was the right pick. I think they should have traded down. And I think to me, it just comes down to job security. I think this was a head coach and a GM who knew that if they took Cam Ward and took a young quarterback, that it lengthens the leash that they have to work with that player instead of trading down and adding talent. And hopefully you have 2 firsts next year and you can have a better chance at it. But I think Titans are going to win like 3 games this year, and we're going to be like, ooh. And I don't even really think it's Cam Ward's fault. That roster is horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a good roster for sure. And we'll see how it plays out. We'll see what happens with Cam Ward, because obviously that's the biggest piece of the puzzle. But there you have it, guys. That is our AFC draft grades. Let us know what you think. Next week, we're going to bounce back to the NFC, and we're going to start our NFL expansion team process. It'll be a 3-week series. The first episode, we will go through every NFC roster and establish protected players. I think, did we decide on 5 on each side of the ball? Or 5 on each side of the ball with a bonus?
Yeah, are we doing 5 with a bonus?
Yeah, so if you guys want to play along at home in advance, go through every NFC roster, pick out your 5 guys on offense, your 5 guys on defense, and then a bonus 11th guy that you would protect from a selection process. We'll do that for the NFC next week, the AFC the week after, and the following week, we will go through the remaining players and select one from each team to fill out a 32-man roster for our expansion team. So you guys can play along at home, see who you would protect, see who you would pick. It'll be a lot of fun. But that's going to wrap it up for this show. Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts?
Listen to the Tough Cover Radio Show coming up in a half hour, talking all things NBA, MLB, a little NFL draft as well. Your Thunder, big Game 7 tonight to determine who's facing Shane's Thunder.
Let's go. It feels like it's been forever since they played a basketball game.
Yeah. That's what happens when you sweep.
It's an interesting first round. Win the first game by like 51 or whatever it was. And then on Thursday night, on draft night, I like had it up on the other monitor and I'm like kind of out of the corner of my eye watching them overcome a 29-point deficit to win. It's like, this is insane. But yeah, we're excited to get the Thunder back in our lives.
The pathway to the finals, pretty clear, Shane.
Let's go. Thunder up. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for joining us for episode number 190 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you saw on the show or heard, we know that you do, smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Take a look at those player protections for in advance of next week's show. You can see how you compare to us. Follow us on Twitter. I am at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. And we will catch you guys next time. Go Thunder.